In this video, the STOic TTX Facilitator training, we're going to go over the participant engagement skill of asking curiosity questions. We've talked about the confirmation questions, but in this type of question, we're going to be digging into some of the things that people haven't thought about and directing people's thoughts into things that they may not have considered. If you have experience in cybersecurity or incident response, you will have a leg up on some of these curiosity questions to ask because you have experience. You know what people either typically forget about, they don't deal with all the time, or you know the gaps that you're seeing from the participants. But if you don't have that level of experience, or even if you do, there's two types of questions that you can ask that you can use to delve into some of these responses. One are the 5 W's, which is who, what, when, where, why, and how. And you can use that whenever people have said something. So there are the confirmation questions, where you basically repeat back what they said. And in this, you ask some of the very, very simple details. This can be really important, especially with very experienced incident responders and participants, because they get used to things and they start taking things for granted. And so by asking some of these very simple questions, like, why are you checking the SIEM for an alert? Or why are you checking the antivirus solution for other computers that have this? It might seem like an obvious question, and the participant might be shocked to say, well, I need to do this because of really obvious reasons. Sometimes by asking that question, you can uncover the fact that they don't know, or they've forgotten, or that they're following a procedure that they don't really understand. As a facilitator, you have to be able to gauge when to ask some of these simple questions, but I love to toss it in, especially to very expert participants and incident responders. So I often ask the question, why? Right? And just very simply, very plainly, why? Without judgment and without expecting an answer. So in one of the tabletop exercise I did, the question was, I want to do forensic analysis on the machine to understand the ransomware. And I very simply asked back, why? And it floored them because they didn't have a reason. They didn't know. They couldn't explain why. They said it because they knew that's what they should say. That's what they should do. But ultimately, they didn't have a reason for it. And as an expert, I knew that spending the time to do that forensic analysis on the machine is going to take an incredible amount of time and take out this very expert person from containing the problem. And perhaps this was not the best use of time for that person, but I didn't want to go there, didn't want to try to explain that. I didn't want to make a very pointed comment about potentially a poor use of resources. All I wanted to do was force them to think about that, and very simply, without any pointedness, just simply asking, why? And if you do that in other places where there might be obvious reasons, people get comfortable with the question and know that they have to justify their response to you as a facilitator and to the other participants as well. Can be a really useful thing. So the 5 W's, the who, what, when, where, why, these questions can be really, really useful. And sprinkling those throughout the exercise can yield some very interesting results. The other curiosity question that you can put in very, very easily, even if you don't have a lot of experience, is what if? And at this point, if you don't have experience in cybersecurity or incident response, one of the things you can do is use a what if for one of the simple injects. And you might have built up a set of injects or a series of injects to go in a certain series or a certain sequence. That's fine. You can do a what if on an inject you didn't prepare for or weren't going to use. And you pull people out of their set mindset in their process that they want to do, and then you toss in this odd angle that they're forced to deal with, and it kicks in their imagination. And it can be a really, really useful thing to do. So do a what if, use one of the simple injects if you can't think of anything else to pull in, or use your own experience as a cybersecurity expert or a non-expert, just someone with experience in cybersecurity, and be able to pull out some of these what ifs. So these curiosity questions can be really, really powerful and really, really useful. So they get out of their blinkered mindset or their tunnel vision in what their process needs to be or what they need to work on, and expand that a little bit and allow a more free-flowing discussion around the issue. If you have experience facilitating for other groups and other participant groups and other organizations, you will start to learn what other organizations do. You might also have experience and knowledge in best practice. And one of the things I like to do is, if the participant group is not doing what would be considered best practice or what other people do, or if another organization has done something really cool and interesting that no one else tends to do, one of the things you can ask your participant group at the table is, would you consider doing that thing, right? And not to make it about that they were supposed to do it or you're expecting them to do it. Make it a purely curiosity question without any expectation at all, and just simply say, other organizations wouldn't do malware forensics, for instance. Other organizations wouldn't do malware forensics. Would you consider not doing malware forensics? Why or why not? Right? Again, you're not setting it up for an expectation. You're not saying what they should do. It's purely curiosity, and if you can deliver it that way, you will have an opportunity to raise a very useful discussion there, because they might not have thought of it, or they might have thought of it and they have a very specific reason why they wouldn't. And being able to capture some of that and know that is very useful too. Now, the one curiosity question I love tossing in. This one's a little pointed, I must admit. The one question I love putting in at some point, especially if someone is going through a long process and have described a long and detailed process that they use, the one question I love to ask, and put this in your question bank, of the pool of questions to pull out in the middle of an exercise, and that is, and is this process written down somewhere? Try not to smirk when you say this. I have a hard time not smirking on this one, because not enough incident responders, and certainly not enough experts, do write it down. If they do, that's great. But you want to be able to put that in front of them and have them deal with that particular question, because that might trigger them to think, ooh, we should write that down. And that becomes an action item that you can document and put in your report. So one of the things that can also happen for this question to be important is that you've got an expert who is making up the process right there and then, right on the spot, right at the table. And it might be correct. It might be a very, very useful process. It might be a very powerful process, but they're coming up with it off the top of their head right then and there, and reminding them that they should be writing this down is also a very useful thing. So you could be writing it down, but really they should be writing down these processes and these procedures in order to handle this. And this question can be really, really powerful. So I classify it as a curiosity question. It really is kind of pointed to get people to document more of these processes so that their incident response can be more consistent and they have a more complete response to incidents based on what they know they should be doing or what they've learned from the past. This is very much like the proto-playbook concept that I talked about in the note-taking section of the training, where these sequences or these processes for how they would respond really can be useful for starting their own playbooks. And maintaining these playbooks and challenging these playbooks is a really important part of a tabletop exercise and can be a really valuable outcome from an exercise.